how you would describe your work, which is very specifically about comics with LCI, but it's actually been a lot broader than that. So could you think about describing your work and perhaps whether you'd be happy to be labelled artist or described as an illustrator, what the issues are there for you?
I just make a lot of different work for a lot of different reasons. So there are certain times if I'm doing quite a prescribed piece of commissioned work, the client doesn't want an artist; they want an illustrator who's going to fulfil the brief. So, I'm the work that I've done on these comics is very much art, I would say, even though it's quite graphic, because it's the thought processes that are involved and the lack of prescription in the end result, and the whole process that I went through to make it. I was making decisions and following a path that I would describe as very much an artistic path. So kind of everything unfolded as I went along, it just wasn't a prescriptive thing. So other work that I do and other comics that I've made as well have been much more prescriptive and much more kind of client-led, written for me to work to. There's a script for me to work to and things like that. So I do a bit of everything really, and I quite like the freedom to call myself whatever it is that I'm doing at that moment in time.
That's really helpful, because I think with this bursary we'll also have who wants to be described simply as an artist alongside who wants to describe themselves as a theologian. And I think other people might feel that a theologian can seem like a bit of a pure term, when actually it's about living in Leeds and reflecting, and as you say, having certain freedoms to explore. And
I think as well, the from the art point of view, I mean, obviously there's an end product for this bursary, but I think if the artist goes in with an idea of what they're going to produce at the end, I don't think that's right for this. I think it needs to be someone who goes in with an open mind and can work with the theologian and have that exchange of ideas and a dialogue that will affect the theology that the theologian produces, but also the art that the artist produces. And whether that's a massive piece of sculpture, or whether it's comics, or whether it's video pieces, or installation, whatever it is, paintings. I don't think. Certainly, my feeling is at this point there isn't a restriction on the sort of art that you're after for this, or that we're after. I don't think anyone who's applying should necessarily come in with a preconceived idea of what they're going to do. I think they'd be losing out if they did, really.
Can you tell us about making the comics?
Yeah, so there's 3 comics. They're kind of a trilogy. They never started off being that, but that's kind of what they've become, I think. And they're all about Leeds. They're all set in Leeds, and I guess they're my attempt to kind of understand Leeds and to work out what I think about what's going on in Leeds. So the process of making them really was started off with me coming into LCI and us having a conversation about ways in which we could work together on some kind of project, and it was quite vague at the start. I think there were quite a few ideas that got kicked backwards and forwards between us, and I think some you as LCI were really keen on, and I was less keen on, and it may be the other way around as well. But the idea for the first comic seemed to be the thing that we settled on. So it was quite an organic thing. It wasn't. I didn't come with a proposal. It was something that kind of got worked out between us as we went along, which for me was fantastic, because I wasn't restricted. So it was a very lovely process. So I went away and started. There was a basic idea that I would do something around the story of Christ in the wilderness, and kind of related to some work that I'd already done in the past. So I think LCI knew roughly what they might be getting. So I went away, and over the period of probably about 6 months to a year, I think I just worked on the comic and worked on the ideas. Came back, we talked about them together, we reflected on them. You gave me some really good pointers and some direction, which was really helpful. It was a very lovely, from my point of view, it was a very lovely collaborative process with a lot of support, and the comics just sort of evolved out of that, really.
Yes, and I think for us at Leeds Church Institute, the final product is brilliant. We've had really positive responses because it's got people both delighting in the art and thinking about Leeds and about justice and spirituality. So it's really good the way those two things have come together.
Yeah. And I think the freedom in the process and it felt like a very collaborative thing, even though I was working on it. I had a few. One of the things that you asked me to do at the start was to have some kind of critical friends. And I had 3 or 4 of those who looked at it with me as it went along, and they came from different. So there was one critical friend who was quite theologically minded. I had quite a few robust conversations with him about what I was doing and how it worked and where the theology fitted into that. I had a friend who's an artist who gave me some kind of visual art feedback on it, and I had another critical friend who's a writer, so he gave me some pointers on the narrative side of it as well. So that was a really helpful thing that you did for me to make me do that. But I just think generally that the freedoms in the process and the light touch that the sort of light touch of the LCI's hand on it was great for me. There's enough freedom there for me to find out what it was. I didn't have to, at the start, I didn't have to say, this is what it will be. And that is, for a creative, that is brilliant. I think the success of all 3 of the comics is a result of the process being quite liberating like that.
That's really good to hear. And I am thinking now about the final comic, which is Signs, and in your reflections on it, you've talked about journeying and the importance of journey. And really, I would say also that the fact that you did the 3 magazines over quite a long time, that there was an essential journey for you as an artist. And do you think it developed your practice or developed your experience? Yeah,
definitely, because you don't get that level of freedom very often. Certainly as an illustrator or a commercial artist, that there are a lot of constraints, and most of the time you're doing work for a client with a very very definite idea of what they want, and you don't get the chance to sort of play really, and try things out, and you don't get the chance to fail. And I was very aware all the way through. Certainly the first comic, How to Disappear Completely, I was very aware that it could have been a disastrous failure, and I could have presented it to you at the end and you could have gone, what is this? But I didn't feel under pressure with that. So I think it gave me the chance to try things out and to experiment and to do things that I'd never really done before. I've done little comic-y things before, but never anything that long. I'd never written anything like that. I had to work out how to do it. From a writing point of view, I had to work out to structure a narrative. There were so many things for me to learn to do, and it's quite a privilege to be trusted to learn to do those things and to be able to pull it off, I think. So yeah, from an artistic point of view, I'm gonna keep using the word freedom, but there was just a lot of freedom in the project for me to try things out, for me to fail, for me to just have a play in and explore, really.
Yeah, I think definitely there was a decision to trust, and I'll say very early on I was very probably surprised at the level of ambition you had for this. And if I did hold my back, well, I think I may have said more than once, are you sure you want to do that much? And I realised that I had to respect you to allow you to get on with it. So I think there was a definite decision for me, having had the discussions, to then say, okay, you want a 64-page comic, and I've been thinking maybe just a few. So you did. And I recognise that, I think, and I really appreciated it, because you don't get that very often. That's not a level of trust and again, freedom that you're gifted very often. So I really appreciated it, and I think, I hope that I kind of repaid the trust, really. But also, being allowed to have that level of ambition, it's just a very lovely and kind of, it's quite an encouraging thing when somebody goes, even if they're going, you sure? Well, all right then, but it is a very, it's quite an empowering thing to go, okay, they're going to let me do that, right, and I think as well, when someone gives you that, when somebody entrusts you with that you take on an extra responsibility to make it work, because you go, right, okay, they believe that I can do it. I really do need to do it. I need to pull it off. And I guess at the time as well, I was thinking this could be a complete disaster. So, and it might be my only shot at this as a result. So, I've got to really do it well, So I was very aware of the opportunity and really wanted to make the most of it. Because for me, it was also a new experience to work with a visual artist.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I drew on very strongly is my background as a practitioner in interfaith dialogue.
Yeah.
So I kind of imagined that we were coming from very different perspectives, and we were needing to find our commonality, but also our differences. So I'm encouraged, I suppose, in my confidence about engaging with the arts from that perspective, that if you do follow good processes of dialogue, like the genuine listening and the building of trust and the coming back to it and giving people space, I think it did work. So quite intriguing for me too.
Yeah, good. I mean, I think, I come out of a church background, so what was nice for me was that there wasn't any expectation that I was going to say particular things or toe a particular theological, or not even a theological, but a sort of religious line or a doctrinal line in anything. There was no, it was the trust thing again. You trusted me to be genuine and thoughtful and honest about the kind of theological thinking that went into it. And I never at any point felt under any pressure to say anything specific or to have any kind of dogmatic kind of thread running through it. And again, that's quite a liberating thing, because I think when you work with churches and church organisations, I think always at the back, as an artist, at the back of the conversation, there's a little bit of what do they want out of this, and what's the kind of motivation for engaging with me. Whereas this process, I didn't really feel that. I think when we first met and we had those initial conversations, it felt like we were trying to work one another out a bit. But I mean, very quickly, I kind of thought, no, this is all right. I'm going to be allowed to even allowed to say some things which might be a bit controversial. And that's a very liberating thing. So it was great.